Cody Arrington from Lubbock, Texas. I represent West Texas, Congressional District 19. And I'm going to facilitate this as best I can. We greatly appreciate the media being here. There is not enough transparency or truth, and there's certainly not enough access to the facts that the American people desperately need to know. And the folks best to tell that are the ones here at Ground Zero and the members of Congress who are deeply concerned about that country and the crisis at this border are here to visit with the local stakeholders and to see firsthand the cause and effect of President Biden and the Biden administration's policies. To kick this thing off, our fearless leader and the chair of the Border Caucus to the United States House GOP Conference, Dr. Brian Babbitt.
Thank you so very much, Jody. And Jody is our leader down here, our co-lead, I should say. He and I have put this thing together. We're so very happy and proud to have a lot of very instrumental, influential stakeholders, law enforcement officers, locally elected people, and some of them have been here for many generations, ranchers and what have you. So I just want to say thank you so very much. I also want to say thank you for you all being here at this very important event to get the word out, on just exactly what is going on down here at the southern border of the United States of America. I want to say thank you to all my colleagues. I want to say thank you to our sheriffs that are here, have come down. And I also want to say thank you to some people who actually have worked in immigration. Mark Morgan, former commissioner of CBP, will be joining us in a little bit. Tom Holman, our former ICE director, Sheriff Louderback, and is going to be speaking to you as well. And I want to also say thank you to one of my sheriffs in my district, 36th District of Texas, which is basically 9 counties from Houston over to Louisiana, Sheriff Brian Hawthorne from Chambers County. So thank you for all of you for being here. This is not political rhetoric, folks. This is the truth. We're going to speak. I'm a plain-spoken guy. I am a dentist by trade and profession, but I've been serving in Congress in my 4th term, and this is one of the most, I think, the most serious questions and issues that we have that this country is facing, and that is an open border. Folks, what's happening down here is not compassionate, as you're hearing from the Biden administration. It's not humane. It is absolutely avoidable. It could have been avoided. You will hear in a little bit that the Biden administration was warned by professionals that if they did away and reverse the policies of President Trump's migrant protection protocols, Title 42 public health restrictions, and do away with our national declaration of emergency, these types of things, stop deportations of folks who've had their cases adjudicated, that a bad crisis would occur, and that's exactly what's happening. We've been through some of these facilities. We went to Donna yesterday. We saw the Border Patrol down there, and the facility that is supposedly going to hold it had a capacity of 250. And guess what? There are 5,700 undocumented immigrants that are in that facility right now at a cost of millions of dollars every single week. It's incredible what's happening down there. Walking through this facility, in the hallway outside of what they used to call cages during the Trump administration, and now are influx facilities, I happened to see a little 3-year-old immigrant, a young girl, sitting in the hallway playing with her toy. And as a grandfather of 17 grandchildren, it just pulls at your heartstrings. There's nothing humane about what's happening here, and the cartels being empowered, and the disaster that is unfolding before our eyes today. And my heart goes out to these people. But the American people, we are the ones who are paying for this thing. as they come into this country and empowered the cartels and being lured up here by rhetoric by the Biden administration to open our borders up. And it is incredible what we are seeing today. We are not getting the truth, folks. We are not getting the truth. And that's what we're here to do, is to make sure that this message gets out, that Americans are being endangered, our borders are open, we have COVID being spread into the state of Texas. We found out yesterday they don't even do COVID tests unless these migrants are showing signs of symptoms of COVID, and then they're released into the state of Texas. So without any further ado, I'd like to just say thanks again, and I'm going to bring my co-lead up here, Jody Arrington from West Texas, and we sure really appreciate what you're doing here as well, Jody. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Babin. It's hard to know where to start, really. It's so overwhelming. And it's having, to say, an adverse impact on our communities here in border states like Texas is the understatement of the year. We have a national disaster, and it's coming out of Washington, out of the Oval Office and this administration, and that's the policies that have created this crisis. And it doesn't matter whether this administration or our president will say those words or admit it. All you have to do is come to McAllen, Laredo, and border communities like it all along the southern border to know that we are burning out of control with absolute chaos. Because our commander-in-chief, whose first and most important job is to provide for the common defense of the American people, has abdicated that. We took boats up and down this river with the Department of Public Safety, where Texas is having to step up and fill the gap and pick up the slack, because we have a president who is supposed to represent law and order, who is supposed to be the chief of law enforcement, completely abandoned his citizens in Texas and all across the country. He's the standard bearer for the rule of law and the Constitution. Folks, yes, it's a public safety crisis. Yes, it is a humanitarian crisis. But I would submit to you, it is a constitutional crisis. That word is thrown around all too often. It's abused and misused. But when the President of the United States, who takes an oath to faithfully execute his office and to protect, promote, and defend the Constitution, and the Constitution is clear. The mission of the federal government is to provide for the general welfare of its citizens and a common defense for its citizens. And in Article 2, Section 3, to faithfully execute the laws of the land. Tell me, how can a president with such a sacred duty and trust from the American people abandon rule of law and the Constitution? Catch and release, no notice to appear, instead of detaining and deporting and respecting the laws of this land and securing our border. We are releasing and rewarding, and it's sending a message. Come one, come all, it's a free-for-all at the border. And if you think that's compassionate, you haven't looked into the eyes of these families who were abused and assaulted on their way over here. We saw them last night. We know the numbers. You know the numbers. 1 in every 3 women are sexually assaulted. They're exploited. I don't want to hear the rhetoric from my colleagues in Washington about poor, vulnerable people. These are the most vulnerable. And they are being extorted and abused while we empower the drug cartel right across this river. The Biden administration and the United States federal government is not in control of the border. The cartels control the border. And it's not because we don't know how, it's because this administration doesn't have the political will to do it. So no, this isn't compassionate. Look into the eyes of the landowners who stand behind them, the private landowners who have seen more trespassing, more dead bodies, more ransacking of their property. Talk about compassion to the citizens of this community who lead in educating the children of communities in Texas, who will tell you they can't do it and do it responsibly and safely and effectively with the deluge of people coming across our border, cutting the line in front of millions who've waited for years to be United States citizens. Well, we welcome the immigrant to this country, but they must respect our laws, our sovereignty, and the safety of our people first and foremost. And nothing of the sort is happening. Nothing. Look, I've taken more time than I expected, and it's time to hand the mic over to a colleague of mine who's been fighting this fight for a whole lot longer than I have. And he took us off the beaten path last night where we didn't have the dog and pony shows and PowerPoint presentations. We got to see these poor folks who've made a very dangerous journey because of the policies and incentives that have real consequences. And we saw it up close and way too personal last night. And it's heartbreaking. Louis Gomer from Texas won. Number one in the hearts.
Thank you, Jody. And Brian, thank you all, and thank you for being here. We did see up close and personal last night. I've spent so many hours, all hours, day and night down here. Last night we also went with Texas DPS on boats down the river. As long as Texas DPS are out there on the river, nobody's crossing. And the reason so many people do cross is because the Border Patrol, they're capable, but they're just not allowed to stop people from coming into the United States. And I hear so much garbage from people in Washington saying, oh, Republicans don't care. They have no compassion. If they would come down here and do what we did this week, last night, they would find out there is nothing compassionate about luring people hundreds, thousands of miles, dealing with drug cartels, and all of the horrors that go with coming up here. We saw more women and children than I've seen in all my trips down here, all the time down here. Last night, the horrors, they were scared to death. What would be compassionate? What would be compassionate is to let them stay in their homes without a drug cartel to just corrupt Mexico. Anybody that knows Mexico knows you got natural resources, you have got wonderful people, most have a deep abiding faith in God, something that made America strong, and you've got some of the hardest working people in the world. Mexico ought to be one of the top economies in the world. One reason it's not, and it's because of the drug cartels that the United States is funneling billions of dollars in that's used to corrupt Mexico. You cut that money to a trickle, and Mexico becomes one of the top economies. These people that are coming up here scared and being brutalized as they come, they stay home and they build better homes. And we help Mexico become the country it should be. That is compassion, not luring people away from their homes. That's just an outrage. We ought to be a good neighbor, and we saw it again last night. It's time to enforce the law. Now, I can't say President Biden is intentionally violating his oath. He's violating his oath, but I don't know if he even knows what he's doing intentionally. But regardless, he's violating his oath, and he needs to have some compassion for the people down here. Let him come down here 1, 2 a.m. and see what's going on as a result of what he's done. We owe our neighbors better, And I am so thankful to be with these men and women from Texas. They care. And I'd like to introduce a dear friend who knows what it is to spend a life helping people. That's what he's done as a medical doctor. My friend, Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Louis. Always a hard act to follow. Mike Burgess, I represent Texas 26th District. It's on the northern part of the state, just north of the DFW airport. DFW airport is not in my district, but the approach is. Look, this situation is not new, but what's new is how bad it has gotten, how fast it has gotten this bad. And one of our objectives here is to amplify what we have been seeing. And I will tell you, one of the things that I've really taken away from this is the enormous job and the enormous debt of thanks this country owes to the men and women on the front lines, Customs and Border Protection, Immigration Customs Enforcement, Department of Health and Human Services that are doing the work that they have been tasked to do. Now the hard thing is, I turned on my TV this morning and notable public health officials are saying they have a sense of impending doom about the pandemic. And that's because we all need to restrict our activities more, but no sense of awareness of what is happening when you pack this many individuals into those Customs and Border Protection holding facilities. They were never intended to hold as many people for as long as they're holding. And if we won't do anything to interrupt the flow in, we're only going to get worse. Yes, there is some seasonal variation. It will be worse in May than it has been in February and March. And we know that from past experience. But what past experience tells us is that when you reach those levels, you really and truly have taken a crisis and turned it into a catastrophe. I really am so grateful to our Brian Babin and Jody Arrington for organizing this and bringing us down here. I now want to yield the floor to the gentleman from the Beaumont, Texas area, Randy Weber, for his comments.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you all for being here. The Biden border crisis is a travesty. I'm 67 years old. I've lived in that great, the finest country in the world, Texas, for 67 of those years. I've never seen anything like this. The Biden border crisis is an absolute catastrophe, travesty. I will tell you that it's funny that Biden has indeed, and Judge Gomer, you're right, we don't know if he did it intentionally, but I know he'll remember it, has abdicated his responsibility of protecting Americans. That should be his absolute first priority. It's kind of funny if you think about it, or maybe it's, I should say, ironic, not funny at all. As head of the Democratic Party, you know, the same ones that want to defund our great police, you know, that party, they want to defund our great police. They're the same ones that have accused Donald Trump of colluding with the Russians. Let's put this in perspective here, folks. Weren't the Bidens the ones that got money from the Russians, from the Chinese, and from the Ukrainians? And now what they're doing, I'm not saying they're getting money from the drug cartel. Are we on? Test, are we on? I'm not saying that they're getting money from the drug cartel. Their policy, or maybe I should say lack thereof of keeping Americans safe, is absolutely enriching the drug cartel. They're making it easy for them to get people across. And now the Democrats have hung out the welcome sign for any and all illegals, including the drug cartel. And they're reaping billions of money. Americans, wake up. Throw the Bidens out of office. Throw the Democrats that don't believe in the sovereignty of our country out of office. Make them pay a price at the polls because they don't deserve to be controlling any of our borders, any of our land, any of elected office, in my opinion. Again, the Biden's border policy is an unmitigated disaster. Appreciate y'all being here. Now I'm going to yield to my good friend Beth Van Dyne, the mayor of our delegation.
Well, I appreciate that, Congressman Weber. I'm Beth Van Dyne, a former mayor of the city of Irving, now Congressional member in.
There we go.
Well, now I'm a congressmember in District 24, which is, DFW Airport is right in the middle of it. It also, right around the neighborhood in Dallas is where they have one of the newest decompression centers, where they had 3.5 days to put together a center that within 5 days is at full capacity with 2,300 kids. 2,300 13 to 17-year-old unaccompanied boys. They were brought there because if you could see the situation that these kids are living in today, it would make you cry. And all of you in the press, you should have access to this. You have to see this with your own eyes. Journalists have to write about this yourself. Because I'll tell you, all of us were told not to take pictures, don't take videos. We don't want people knowing what's going on in the outside world. But I'll tell you, no matter what you see from our small lenses is equal to the emotion that you feel when you see it in context. Pod after pod after pod of kids lying on the ground, barely enough room to even see the floor. This capacity, there was maximum capacity of 250 people at the Donna facility we visited yesterday. 250 people, maximum capacity. They had 5,700 people there yesterday. They are trying to move them out as quickly as they can to decompression centers around the country, where they're then filtering them out, processing them through as quickly as possible and bringing more in. There is no plan. The plan is to make our country and basically an open borders country. Now, as mayor, I had a great relationship with ICE. We were not a sanctuary city. We fought against it being a sanctuary country. We had a great relationship with ICE. What we found was when you actually deported criminal, illegal aliens from your city, your crime rate drops. We had the lowest crime rate in our city's history during that time. We became the 5th safest city in the country. Also at that time, we were the fastest growing in our city's history, both economically and population-wise, because people want to live in a safe community. What you see down at the border right now is not humane. It is not compassionate. It's horrible and it must stop. Please welcome me in joining Pete Sessions, former chair of the Rules Committee in the Waco area and Roseville. Pete?
Congresswoman, thank you very much. An opportunity for me to make my 5th visit down to this particular park in the border. It is very important for us to understand that this administration not only has given the words and viewpoint that is encouraging this invasion on our country, but it's important to note that law enforcement has been neutered in their opportunity to see and be able to respond properly to the needs of the people. The laws of this country are there to protect American citizens, but also private landowners and people who live in our cities. What is occurring is that aerostats are being taken down. People who are in law enforcement are being used to do tasks that deal with human needs within their agencies. They're being moved around. The people who are supposed to be on the front line are now doing humanitarian work. This is a problem for not just this valley, but also for the tens of thousands and then 100,000 a month that then filter into the rest of America, that move into urban areas, that then flood our schools, that then flood our hospitals. It is an unmistakable problem for cities. It is an unmistakable problem for the future of cost for this country that this Democratic Party and this president are personally responsible for. Last, if you do not uphold the laws of your country, you fail to have a country with reliable borders, with law enforcement that works effectively, and rule of law. The people who stand behind me had a direct meeting this morning where we talked about people who expect the people who are in law enforcement to follow the law, people who are landowners want and need people who will respect that and that they can back that up. We are being overrun with an invasion of people that we do not want to come to this country illegally. America brings in 1 million people legally a year, more than any other country in the world. And we want and need this southern border and our northern border to be respected with rule of law. The Democratic Party wants to do away with law enforcement, they want to do away with ICE, and they need to be held politically accountable, and we're going to make sure that happens in 2 years. The next person I want to introduce is a brand new member of Congress, but he is not new to public service. He served our great country in the United States Navy. He served his country working out of the SEAL team and special operations. He is a physician. He served in the White House as a White House physician, and now we're pleased to call him a colleague. Congressman, where are you? Ronnie Jackson.
Thanks, sir. I appreciate that. Well, the good news is I'm the anchor man for the Texas delegation, so I'm the last congressman to talk to you here. But I just want to point out that I think, what we see here on the border is just absolutely unbelievable. And as Congressman Sessions just mentioned, I've been here before. I was up here when I was the chief medical officer, the chief medical advisor to President Trump. He sent me up here to the border numerous times early in the Trump administration when we were still dealing with the issues related to the Obama era policies. They were creating a lot of incentives for folks to come up here, and we saw that. We had a little issue with the measles outbreak. This is much, much worse. I've never seen anything like this. It's been mentioned before. We went to the facility yesterday, and literally if you put one more person into the little plastic cages that they put these people into, you would have been stacking them on top of each other. You couldn't see the floor at all. There was not one spot to put another person in there. And these are essentially, COVID incubators in the environment that we're in right now. I mean, we can't forget that we're in a pandemic right now. The Biden administration is talking all the time about how we have to continue to socially distance and, wear one mask, wear two masks, and make sure that, that we continue to keep the pandemic and COVID at the forefront of everything we do. Yet simultaneously, they're allowing hundreds of thousands of unscreened immigrants that we know have a positive rate of about 5 to 10% to come in and to be released into our community. And, that's just one part of this tragedy. That's the humanitarian, human tragedy that's going on right now with these immigrants coming across. And there's another part to this as well. We've met with all the stakeholders out here since we've been here. We've talked to all of them. They are stretched so thin they cannot do their job out here right now. And we don't have Border Patrol out there protecting our borders right now. You know why? Because they're all at the point of entry processing these people that are coming across in large numbers. And Jody mentioned earlier, President Biden's job is to be the President of the United States, to take care of us, law-abiding citizens, citizens of this country. And that's not happening. He mentioned he's supposed to be our commander-in-chief. He's supposed to be our chief law enforcement officer. He's not. I'll tell you what he is right now. He's functioning as the trafficker-in-chief right now. And I say that because the cartels are in complete control right now. They bring these people up to the border. They don't even have to sneak them across anymore. They just drop them off. And the Biden administration handles the remaining logistics of getting them settled somewhere in this country. And this is a shame. This should not be happening in this country right now. This is going to be a burden to us for many years. While they're doing this, the cartels love this because when they've got all these people tied up, all the border patrol agents and everybody else tied up at the border, processing these people through, they are running large amounts of narcotics across our border. There's human trafficking, there's sex trafficking, there's criminal elements coming across, and it's a free-for-all right now. It's an absolute free-for-all. So we're going to see firsthand over the next few months the human tragedy here with these poor people that are being enticed to come up here at great personal risk and make this journey come into our country. But we're also going to see the results of the criminal element and the drugs and all the other stuff that's coming across our border. That is also going to take a toll on our country. So with that, I'll just close it out, and I want to take the opportunity at this point to introduce a great American, Tom Holman, who used to be our director of ICE. Tom, come on up here, and Tom can talk more about the criminal part of it as well.
Okay. You all know me. I'm probably the only guy up there that wore that Border Patrol uniform back in 1984. Let me tell you something. There's not a bigger bunch of American patriots than men and women of Border Patrol. And I got to argue with two people. I saw compassion the other day in the border. I saw a big burly Border Patrol that kneel down and talk to a crying child. And within a couple minutes, that child cracked a smile, he gave him candy. That's where the compassion is. And you can argue all you want, you can hate President Trump, but no one can argue the fact that he gave us the most secure border in my lifetime, my career. I worked for 6 presidents, starting with Ronald Reagan, and I respect every president that I worked for because of the President of the United States. But the fact is, President Trump did more to secure this border than any president. Probably all 5 combined. Because Mr. Morgan, I'm sure, is going to talk to you about the numbers. The numbers don't lie. Illegal immigration has historic low. They want to say this is seasonal, happens every year. There's a bunch of crap. Last March, 33,000 apprehensions. This March, 150,000 apprehensions. Tell me how that's seasonal. That's not seasonal at all. That's based on this administration's politics. Commissioner Morgan's going to talk about what's going on in the border. I'm going to talk about what happens after the fact, and no one's talking about it. What happens to these thousands of people being released in the United States? They're not going anywhere. They're never leaving. And there's 2 data points I want to share with you, and I hope you report it, because this administration was aware of it, and so was President Trump. And let me tell you how they handle it differently. If you go to the DOJ website, the Immigration Court website, look at Central Americans. Let's just use them for example. Out of all the Central Americans that claim fear at the border, they want to file for asylum, 86 to 89% don't qualify because they either don't show up in court or they lose the case. They simply don't qualify. So when you got 9 out of 10 people who claim fear at the border that does not get relief from U.S. courts, that tells you we got a problem. President Trump recognized that, so well, 9 out of 10 don't win. Why are we letting the United States release them and never see them again? Let's keep them in Mexico. They'll still get the due process, but on our schedule, and we don't have all those people released. The second data point that Donald Trump realized was to go to a Homeland Security Lifecycle Report, less than 3% of the hundreds of thousands of families that lost their case, that 90%, that lost their case, less than 3% left. So if you got 9 out of 10 committing some sort of fraud at the border and less than 3% of them leave, you got a problem. President Trump addressed it, saying, I'm not going to allow this to happen anymore. This administration has the same data that I just reported to you. And their answer is, let's release more. And not only release more, let's release them even quicker. I'm sure during the first family surge in FY14, you know what we did? We built the first family residential center. We held families for about 40, 45 days. In a family residential center, not a jail, 90% lost their case. We put them on an airplane and sent them home. And guess what happened? The border numbers plummeted. Then the Ninth Circuit, in their genius ways, they said, you can't hold them for 40 days. You don't want to hold them for 20. And we told them, if you make that decision and not allow us to hold them while they see a judge, you're going to see border surge like you've never seen before. I put in my affidavit. What did I was called a fear minder. I had no evidence of this. And guess what happened? They said 20 days, families surged up, and we had an unprecedented border surge at that time. These are the facts. And what is this administration doing? They're even going further left than the Ninth Circuit. They're saying 20 days. How about 3? The law says 3 for children. Let's say 3 for families. They're going so far left. They fell off the table a long time ago. Now I'm talking to you like I know what's going on, but apparently I really don't know what's going on because I was kicked off the Homeland Security Advisory Council last week. They don't want to hear from a 34-year veteran who wore the uniform, who spent 3 decades investigating criminal cartels that smuggle people, who actually dealt with border surge itself. They don't want to hear from us. Why? Because this administration has no intention of enforcing the law. ICE has been gutted. ICE isn't deporting hardly anybody unless you're a convicted aggravated felon, which means all those family groups I talked about that ignore the final order and that's 3% left. What is their penalty for ignoring the judge's order after we put them in front of the judge at great taxpayer expense? What's their penalty from hiding and ignoring a federal judge's order? Their penalty, they're getting amnesty. And these thousands of people being released in the country now, they're not going anywhere either. Because ICE is not removing fugitives of immigration law. You think that's by accident? They decided to gut ICE at the same time 1,000 people being released in the United States, and ICE is the agency responsible for removing people upon orders? This is by design. This isn't incompetence. This isn't they don't know what they're doing. Remember, Joe Biden was vice president during the 14-15 surge they talked about. and Alejandro Mayorkas is deputy secretary. They know what causes surges. They know how to stop them. I was there. They're doing the complete opposite. Well, they know it's going to fix it. The complete opposite. And I want to end with this. I started as border patrol agent, and what I've seen the last 2 days, when you got, you know, when these men and women are being attacked and vilified, I know Mark Morgan's going to talk about this because he's humane, he's great patriots. They're American heroes, they're American patriots, and it's a shame that their commander-in-chief attacks them. When the secretary don't admit there's a crisis. Me and Mark Morgan was down to their team the other day. Fortunately, he yelled out to me. I turned around, he walked up to me, he thanked me. And Mark Morgan, he goes, you know what? Our president won't admit this problem. Our secretary won't admit this problem. Thank you and the Commissioner Morgan for out there yelling and screaming, trying to tell American people the truth. You're our only hope. This comes from someone who's strapping a gun to his hip, putting his life on the line to raise this country. And they've been abandoned by this president. The first president in the history of this country who is facilitating illegal immigration, who is facilitating cross-country crime. There is no downside on a secure border. There is no downside in 31% of women not being raped. There's no downside in children not dying. There's no downside in children being put in the arms of criminal cartels. There's no downside unless illegal narcotics come across this border. So explain to me why this administration refuses to enforce law. There's one reason. This is Open Borders' agenda. This is their plan, and it's happening in front of your eyes today. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Mark Morgan, who has much more to say.
All right, so that's a hard act to follow. So as I was sitting here listening to the congressional members and Tom talk, you know, I thought about one thing. Who else should be standing here today? Who else should be standing right where we're standing, the epicenter of the crisis that's been thrown upon us? The President of the United States. Where is he? He's not here. But yet, what they're going to do is they're working, overtime to make sure, instead of standing here and being honest with the American people about the crisis they've created, they're spending overtime trying to make us and convince us and believe that we're not seeing what we're actually seeing. That what's happening here on our southwest border isn't actually happening. Well, let me provide a couple of stats, and Tom mentioned this. You're going to see the numbers from this March, 150,000 apprehensions. That's last year, this time last year, 33,000. That's about a 350% increase. Seasonal? No, I don't think so. The same time period last year, under the Trump administration, the numbers declined significantly. They have more than doubled over the same time period under this administration. 6,000 apprehensions a day. 6,000 a day. UACs have surpassed the highest level numbers that we experienced in the 2019 crisis. You're being told, this is the only thing that's really been put out that is honest, is that we're going to see numbers that we haven't seen in over 20 years. We're going to estimate at this rate, and I'm being conservative, 1.4 million apprehensions this calendar year. That's larger than the entire city of Dallas, Texas, in a calendar year. And now, I'd like to say something directly to our current DHS Secretary, Mayorkas. Mr. Secretary, I'm asking you, please, stop lying to the American people. Stop lying to the brave men and women, Customs and Border Patrol, that Tom talked about, that are out here on our front lines defending this nation. Stop telling the American people that our borders are secure. You know it's a lie. Stop saying that our borders aren't closed. Look, right now, if you're an unaccompanied minor outside of Mexico, you're being released into the United States. If you're a family from the Western Hemisphere, right now, you are being released into the interior United States. If you were once an enrollee in the Remain in Mexico program, you are now being brought to our border and released into the interior United States. So far under this administration, if you count UACs, unaccompanied minors, and families that have been released, that number exceeds 45,000. And I'm being conservative. Don't tell me that our borders are closed. And as far as the borders being secured, Mr. Secretary, that's another lie. And look, I could talk for 2 hours about just how our borders are open, but let me give you one stat, one realistic thing that's happening right now. And some of the congressional members mentioned it. Right now, the Border Patrol, and we've been this. This is not our first rodeo. In 2019, when everybody called it a crisis, because we knew it was a crisis, the cartels, they changed their tactics. They started using families and unaccompanied minors as a distraction, using them as a piece of garbage. We saw, Tom and I were around a couple nights ago, we saw in action hundreds of family units and unaccompanied children. The cartels, the smuggling organization, put them in one area. And so, of course, what happens? The Border Patrol resources, it takes an exhaustive amount of resources to go there and provide the humanitarian assistance that's needed. And so what happens right to our left and right? The border is wide open, it's not monitored, and Mr. Secretary, it is not secure. Drugs are pouring in, and criminal aliens are pouring in. Right now, because in some areas, this one being one of them, 40 to 50% of Border Patrol resources are being pulled off the line, away from their national security mission. And so what's happening right now? They're estimating 1,000 gotaways every day. 1,000 every day. Criminal aliens coming through every single day. 30,000 in a month. No, Mr. Secretary, our borders are not secure. Another thing that I really wanted to mention too, another just complete misdirection, quite frankly another lie that this administration is telling. So they create this crisis and they're trying to spin and blame everybody but themselves. Oh, we weren't notified. There wasn't an adequate transition because the Trump administration was in a disarray as they went out. I'm telling you that's a lie. That's a lie, and I know it's a lie because I was still there as acting commissioner of CBP. We provided exhaustive briefings to the transition team. We specifically told them, if you ended MPP, the Migrant Protection Protocol, if you ended Title 42, if you ended the Asylum Cooperative Agreements with the Northern Triangle countries, you will drive an unmitigated crisis that will make 2019 pale in comparison. We told them that again and again. We told them that the surge numbers would skyrocket and the Border Patrol facilities would be overwhelmed. We told them that HHS facilities would be overwhelmed. But they let their ideological hubris make them ignorant and not listen to the very border experts that were telling them that if they did what they've done, we would be exactly where we're at today. And what I want to end with is something that Tom talked about. I also want to talk directly to the incredible women of Customs and Border Protection. Tom mentioned I'm like him. I've served under 6 administrations. I've been serving this country for 35 years in the military and law enforcement. And look, this brings me no pleasure to say, but I watched the President of the United States give a press conference and lie to the American people. He said that we, along with the men and women in CBP, were implicit in returning unaccompanied minors back to the hands of the coyotes, to force them to take a dangerous journey on their own back to their home country. That we left them on the banks of the Rio Grande on the Mexican side to starve to death. It's an absolute lie. It never happened. And that is reckless, that is irresponsible, and it's personally offensive. Let me tell you, as Tom mentioned, let me tell you about the true character and the compassion and the men and women of the CBP, specifically the Border Patrol, that I've personally seen. Last year, thousands of rescues. Just this past week, here in Texas, we had a mother and a daughter and a son drowned trying to come across the Rio Grande River, and the coyotes just left them there. Who do you think responded? Border Patrol. Who do you think saved the mom and the son? Brought them back to life. Unfortunately, they couldn't bring the daughter, 9-year-old, she died. That's the true character of the men and women. They're not leaving anybody on the banks of anywhere to die and to starve to death. They never returned unaccompanied minors to the hands of cartels. What we did is we spent an incredible amount of funding and resources and time providing them clothing, food, shelter, medical attention. We chartered 747s at great taxpayers' expense, similar aircraft that professional athletic teams chartered, and flew them back to their home country, where we coordinated extensively with the home countries to make sure they had the capacity to receive them. And guess what? Return them to their families in their home country. That's the truth. So I'm going to finish by saying to the men and women of Customs and Border Patrol Protection, thank you for what you do every single day. You're my heroes, and you're always going to be my heroes. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark and Tom. Thank you for your service to our country. Thanks for helping us tell the American people what's really going on. The problem with the cancel and censorship culture, before long, it eats everybody up. And now the media can't even get in and have access. We're just trying to help tell you guys what's going on and what we're hearing from the folks who are here on the ground. not in some memo we're getting on our desk in Washington, D.C. With that, one of the most important engagements on our agenda since arriving yesterday has been to meet and listen to the local stakeholders, starting with those on the front lines, our local law men and women, who are risking their lives, leaving their neighborhoods to be adjunct border patrol agents to fill the gap as was described. A.J. Lauterbach from Jackson County, representing a lot of really good men and women in uniform, and the folks in cowboy hats here representing sheriffs from 13, 14, 15 counties. We appreciate you being here today. A.J., would you come say a word or two?
Thank you, Congressman. The first thing I want to do today is thank this Republican delegation of Congress for coming here today and brought some shining light on where we need it most. Hats off to each of the congressmen here today. Appreciate y'all very much. Mark, Tom, longtime friends and associates of mine. But I'll tell you what we ought to call today. I'll tell you what we ought to call it, what you ought to print. You ought to print this as a truth delegation here in Texas. In McAllen, Texas, what you have here is the truth. With truth comes trust. Maybe, just maybe, the role of Texas sheriffs and sheriffs across this United States can help this administration find the truth, or the ability to say the truth out here and illuminate this and bring this problem that we have, this catastrophic crisis that's brought about with Joe Biden's signature on it. President Joe Biden's signature is on this. Maybe, just maybe, with the help of all of us together, with unity and strength as Americans, we can come together and fix this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheriff. Well said, and very efficiently said, I might add. They're men of action. Few words, and God bless them, because if they don't act, we're all in trouble. They are on that thin blue line. God bless our men and women in law enforcement. I'm going to ask Richard Garrett to come up here, if you would. I'm putting him on the spot a little bit, but we had the South Texas Landowners Association join us in this local stakeholder dialogue, and probably heard as interesting, important, and new facts as I've heard since I've been here. So would you just share with these folks how this crisis is impacting our local landowners here in Texas?
Yes, sir. Again, my name is Richard Garrett. I'm a rancher. I ranch in Stark County. Stark County, just west of Rome. And where my ranch is, about 8,000 acres of land. My southernmost fence is exactly 1 mile from the river. Across the river is Miguel Alemán, Mexico. It is one of the strongholds of cartels. Right there at my doorstep. We hear all the activity that goes on in Mexico because it's so close. these guys stand tall in what they believe. And all I can say is, thank you, Congressman, thank you for inviting us, and please listen to us. We need every help that we can get. One thing that hasn't been mentioned, and I want to thank the governor of Texas, Governor Abbott, for sending the state system to protect us. Activities to criminal activities. We serve you in justice. The local public, the state system has been a great asset. Thank God for that. And the last thing I will say, I'll say this thing, thank God that these guys have the level to stand here and say what they have said. Thank you so much.
Senator, I think I understood it right. I heard Lugar and Weber in a press conference for the first time today. I think we're back in Texas, Pete. You know, this isn't a slick politician here. This is a straight shooting cowboy from South Texas. He didn't know he was going to speak. I don't know that he knew he was going to speak at our roundtable discussion, like a lot of folks. But they love their country and have a love for this country and have a deep concern for their community and their livelihood. They're crying out for help from their federal government and from the country they love. And I'm so thankful for you, Richard. Thanks for sharing that. And folks, we'll take some questions. We got plenty of experts here. So, yes, ma'am.
Hi, thank you. Sandra Sanchez, Reporter Report. I wanted to clarify a few things. Earlier, Representative Babin said that the Biden administration did away with MPP as well as Title 42 restrictions. However, Title 42 remains in effect until April 21st. The other thing was Representative Gohmert said Border Patrol was not allowed to stop people coming into the United States. They're not allowed to apprehend them. So what would he have them do? Turn them back in the middle of the river? Could you please clarify?
Your question about what I said about the Biden administration reversing MPP, that pertains to UACs. That pertains to UACs. And we've got Title 42, Title 42, public health restrictions. They have done away with that for the unaccompanied children. For other people, it has not been done away with. So thank you for the question.
And Representative Gohmert talking about Border Patrol not allowed to stop people, what would he want them to do?
Well, I don't know where our friend Lou Gohmert went, but we just want the law to be enforced. And the law says you must be detained, you must have your day in court, and then if you don't have a meritorious asylum claim or a lawful reason for being here, you gotta go back to your own country, your country of origin. And we'll be compassionate about it, we'll be humane about it, but we must stand firm in that regard, or we have no borders in this country. It's really that simple. And I think when you juxtapose the last administration reducing illegal border crossings by 70+% with this uncontrollable surge, it's real simple. Secure the border, enforce the laws. I'd say turn the magnets off that pull people here and close the loopholes that people are exploiting. But if you just, at a minimum, because Congress has a lot of work to do, we can't put it all on any one administration. But you gotta start with securing the border and enforcing the laws. And these poor folks out here, local, state, and federal law enforcement officers, have had their legs completely cut out from under them on account of catching and releasing, on account of no notice to appear, and quite frankly, the Title 42, which we say is still in place, not really. It's partially in place. You got Democrats like Henry Cuellar joining us, telling the truth. He says, I'm getting more information from Mexico and the government officials in Mexico than I am this administration. That's not from a Republican. That's from our friend Henry Cuellar, who we will see later on this evening. some of these may be half-heartedly, maybe on paper, still in place, but we can tell you down the line, declaration of emergency, having support and backup from the military, holding accountable sanctuary cities, the list is long, and I'm sure you have access to it, but it's a half-ass deal. Okay, that's what my dad would call it, a half-ass, a way to secure the border and enforce the laws at best. At best. Most of it is just completely abdicating the laws on the books and the responsibility. Yes, ma'am.
Did you go to the holding pen at Council Lewis Bridge? And if you did, can you detail what you saw?
We did. We did go, we went a lot of places, so it's hard for me to keep track of exactly where, but we went to a bridge. I think it's the bridge you're referring to. There were droves of people late at night coming across and turning themselves in, essentially. I don't think I saw one of them that didn't have a child in their arms. And we already talked about the treacherous journey and the risk that they take, but it is very clear that they've received the message. And these children are really being used as a passport because they know that's their best chance of being released and held unaccountable to stay in this country permanently. And that's clear.
Look, what they're not telling you is the Biden administration has given a green light to child traffickers and human traffickers. You know damn well that some of these children over here are being trafficked by criminal organizations. The reason I say that, when I was the ICE director, we had criminal investigations where children are being rented by cartels to pull aside the family unit. Once they get released, they get back to Mexico and re-rented again. It happens. No one celebrated more this presidency than the criminal cartels in Mexico. They're back in business. That's why I said they're facilitating crime on the border because cartels are making millions of dollars a day. And I'm sick of them saying they're being humane. When you send enticements out that puts the most vulnerable people in the arms of criminal cartels, it's dangerous. To say the Trump administration, shame on them for separating 2,500 families because the parents being prosecuted. U.S. citizen families get separated every day by sheriffs who arrest a U.S. citizen parent who commits a crime with his child. They get separated. This administration has already caused 17,000 family separations by parents putting their children in the hands of criminal cartels. That's what's happening. And the reason I get so emotional about it, whether I'm testifying from a Congress or on TV, is because I've seen the results. I've talked to women who were raped over 20 times making that journey. I've held dead children in my arms. This administration, I said it when they announced it, that death's going to come. You're going to see more rapes, you're going to see more death. Because you entice the vulnerable population, they're going to come. That's why this administration needs to go back to at least turn on the Remain in Mexico program. They'll still get their hearings. But they're not going to put themselves in the hands of criminal cartels. There's nothing humane about that. I've seen what these cartels can do. If they can't pay their smuggling fee, they will be tortured. Ice Storm, Phoenix, Arizona, can't pay a smuggling fee. They say, we'll get to Chicago 10,000. Once they get to the stash house, they call the family, 20,000. We can't afford it. They will call the family and torture that family and let the family listen to it because they couldn't pay their smuggling fees. If they couldn't pay, they'd kill them. And they did. Criminal cartels have been empowered by this administration. People are going to die. That's the problem, and I've seen it. I've seen it, I've investigated it, it's a fact. That's what the danger is here. It's not only on a lawless border, people will die. And only the bad guys are going to win.
Pete Sessions.
I want to offer a speaker here real quickly who spoke to us at breakfast this morning. And he has a very clear message that we need to hear because I think it's important. Mr. Ramirez, do you mind coming up and taking a minute with us? And I hope you'll, I've asked him to do something that I feel very strongly about, sir.
Gracias, congresista. Le quiero dar el agradecimiento a todos los de la prensa de estar aquí en este momento y darle muchas gracias a todos los congresistas, a los oficiales, a los sheriffes, a los rancheros por estar con nosotros ahora. Esto es una causa muy importante. No se puede negar de lo que está pasando. Necesitamos ponerle atención a toda la gente que está aquí, la que está en las líneas de enfrente, peleando, y soportar toda esa gente. Y la gente que puede hacer esto son estos señores y señoras que nos pueden ayudar en Congreso. Otra vez, muchas gracias por acompañarnos aquí, y a la prensa, a la rueda de prensa también, que estén aquí ahora apoyando a esta causa. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. This is important because the people who live in this area, who have come legally to our country and who call America home, care very much about what is happening to our country and what our country would become also, and that is where rule of law would not be important. And this is what is causing so many people to flee, is from drug cartels and governments that are corrupt, that will not protect its own people. And yet when you come here and you're legal and you have a business and you expect people to have a system that works, and that system that needs to work is what this gentleman just spoke about. He spoke about a system that needs to work properly, and how people who are back here stand for rule of law, the big dream in America, but doing that where we have control of our border through legal processes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete. And ma'am, just to put a fine point there on your question, it was an example of how border patrol agents were taken off task of their security mission to process and to care for these folks, and the gaping hole it leaves. We talked to the drug enforcement agents, but just down the line, you leave a gaping hole for criminal activity. So we expect to see more acceleration and exacerbation of the gangs, the crime, the drugs, on account of these folks being taken off task. Yes, sir.
Two more questions.
Yes, Commissioner Bonga, how are you? Good to see you back in the area. I wonder if you can give us your thoughts. You were just there at CBP not too long ago, and you see what just happened in the last 2 months. Stuff 180 more or less. What are your thoughts? Let me get this mic moving.
So, like I said, you're exactly right. This is a 180. But what we've been saying is the stroke of a pen. This president, through executive orders, has dismantled every single effective tool, authority, and policy that we had to effectively mitigate the crisis that we saw in 2019. Look, you don't have to take our word for it. You don't have to take their word. Look at the stats. The numbers don't lie. March of last year, the numbers had plummeted to 33,000. This March, 150,000. Like I said, a 350% increase. You can't deny those numbers. Let's go across the board. Again, UAC, the highest unaccompanied per month that we have seen in history. It's going to be the highest level of the numbers we've seen in over 20 years. And talk about the gaping holes. Let's talk about facts. Again, we saw this in 2019. We're seeing it right now. 50% of water resources being pulled off the line. We had that stop. I'll give another quick stat. Last year, we had less than 800 individuals in our custody, CBP. Less than 800, which is exactly the point behind the CDC's order to further reduce the introduction of COVID-19 into our country from outside our borders. And one of the biggest things is we wanted to eliminate the number of people that we had in our open-air congregate settings because they're COVID petri dishes. 800, that was a pretty good number, and we were trying to get it lower. Guess how many they have in custody now? Over 10,000. How is that right? How is that humane? You've heard that from everybody. So when people ask what has changed, everything imaginable that gave us the ability to handle and mitigate the crisis has gone away in a matter of a few weeks. And we said, look, I don't want to, I'm going to say it. I told you so, right? Is that before the election, We were saying out there, and I too, I was called a fear monger like Tom was, I was called a Trump sycophant, because I said, if any administration did what the Biden administration said they were going to do, that you would create a crisis, an unmitigated crisis, that would make 2019 pale in comparison. And here's where I got it wrong. I thought maybe by May we'd be about 100,000. We hit that last month. So everything that was in place, and we're just touching the tip of the iceberg, talking about MPP is gone. And so to answer your question, MPP has been removed for everybody. They ceased out on day one. It went further than that, though, right? So they didn't just stop our ability, like, to enroll new people in MPP, which ended catch and release, which was the most significant incentive for people. They knew if they came to the border in 2019 with a family, they were going to be released into the interior United States, and as Tom Holmes, the Patriots said, never to be heard from again. MPP ended that. You saw the numbers plummet by February of 2020 by 75%. So not only did they end MPP, but they went a step further. And now they said everybody that was previously enrolled in MPP, we're actually going to bring you back, and they've already done it, and release them into the interior United States. ACAs, I've got to mention this because this is a good question. The ACAs, the silent cooperative agreements, these were unprecedented agreements with the Northern Triangle countries, along with MPP. By the way, so what did this administration do? Immediately rip up all the agreements we have with all these countries to address it as the regional crisis that it was. Unprecedented agreements that were working. We were working this crisis together as countries across the board. And they dismantled that agreement. They dismantled that cooperation. The ACAs, look, we got to where the international standard is. And the international standard should be, if you have a valid asylum claim, isn't the most humane thing is to encourage people with a valid asylum claim to seek relief and assistance in the first country they come to? Isn't that the most humane thing? This administration ripped up that policy. So now they're back in the hands of the cartels, form shopping and coming all the way, and they're abused. And we could go on and on and on. So I know that's a long answer because I get fired up, but everything you can imagine has been changed.
Well, you have lawmakers back here who will also remember this. To add insult to injury, at the height of this new surge of the illegal immigrants and the overwhelming situation that we've described, Democrats in the House passed a bill, a partisan bill, to grant amnesty, mass amnesty and path to citizenship for people who cut the line and are here in this country illegally. So on top of that, you've got insult to injury for the American people and the pain and suffering that you've heard and we've seen on the faces of our fellow Americans. You also had another law that was a bill that passed the House on a pure partisan basis. It said DHS, the Homeland Security Department, could not share information with local law enforcement. It also said we're going to not use the word illegal anymore. We're just going to say non-citizen. It also gave folks who come across our border and violate our laws and sovereignty the ability for taxpayer funding to have legal counsel. The list of horrible ideas that only add, if not gasoline to the fire of chaos that burns on the border, certainly insults the intelligence of the American people. And then this president makes an announcement that Kamala Harris, as vice president, is going to be the border czar. You remember the last surge, the 19? She said that's a distraction from real issues. She called what the agents who worked for these gentlemen, she called what they did to simply enforce the immigration laws a reign of terror. Compared them to the KKK. She wants to decriminalize border crossings, and she wants to give Medicare. Even though in less than 10 years, Medicare is bankrupt. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. The list is too long, as we said. I'm going to take one more question, maybe two more questions from One American News. Jen, fire away. By the way, Brian Babin mentioned that we did invite, as soon as we understood that Kamala Harris, our vice president, was in charge. In fact, I think the president's words were, she doesn't have to consult with me. She's going to go down there and fix it. And then That was right before she said she wasn't gonna come to the border. She's the border czar. She's not coming to the border. But we invited her to join us on this trip because we wanted her to see what we've seen and hear what we've heard. Jen.
Thank you, Congressman. Jen Pellegrino with One American News. My question for you is at McAllen International Airport, not far from here, we witnessed this week dozens of migrants. This was in one day, with boarding passes, with paperwork that indicates they don't speak English. Please let us know what plane to get on. And they're headed for other cities within the United States. Can anybody tell us how many of these migrants are being flown not only here, but perhaps in other border cities to elsewhere within the U.S., and who is funding that? What's the situation going on here?
Will somebody answer her question? I've seen pictures of it, and I can't explain that, but I know it exists, and so.
That's a good point. This isn't a border issue. This is a United States issue. These families run all the place. They're being bused to certain bus stations being released, or releasing some to NGOs. They're flying out of airports. And as I think Mark mentioned, we're simply completing the criminal conspiracy of alien smuggling. And I'm sure some of these families that are hurting cartels and bringing their kids up here, they just got into the border. And the Biden administration is getting busted. So they're going all the country. I mean, there's Chicago, New York, Maryland, Washington State. Most of our heads are sanctuary cities. Why? Because law enforcement won't work with ICE. Which, the Biden administration said, well, murders and aggravated felons are still important, but then they dropped the laws to be in sanctuary cities. So even though murderers and rapists can still be a priority through ICE, they're going to be released from sanctuary jails every day, despite what the president says, because he purposely ignored the sanctuary cities on the issue. They are going to all 50 states. This issue we're dealing with in Texas is a national issue. Sanctuary cities is now a sanctuary country, because this administration meant it.
If I can jump in there real quick. So this is a very important question, because it's important what's happening. So when the Biden administration says they're going to start managing the crisis, we need to pay attention, because the managing the crisis is 180 degrees from what we were managing the crisis under the Trump administration. Under the Trump administration, managing the crisis meant we did everything we could to prevent, apprehend, detain, and lawfully remove. What you're seeing now, what you just described, these are my words. Don't trip to these guys. These are my words. I believe this is a systematic cover-up of this administration to cover up the catastrophic crisis that it created by not simply releasing people on the border. They're pushing them out into the further interior of the United States, so it doesn't appear like the crisis that it is. And when they say they're going to get a handle on this, this is what they need. They're going to create and get really good at creating reception centers on our borders, and they're going to start releasing people as fast as humanly possible. So Tom and I, what we've been saying, on the front end, they're going to create reception centers, release them as fast as possible to cover up the catastrophic crisis, and on the back end, we have a sanctuary country. That's what this administration means by managing the crisis.
Sounds like this border crisis is coming to a town near you. National crisis, great concern. We are grateful. I'm going to say it again on behalf of my colleagues in Congress and those who are standing behind us and beside us in this endeavor. We are so appreciative that you guys would take the time to cover this. I know you have more questions, and some of these guys will stick around and answer them. We'll just do some one-on-one interviews if that's okay, because I think we're running out of time. Hey, God bless all of you here in McAllen, your local media, the national media that traveled to be here with us, and especially God bless the men and women in uniform, the Border Patrol folks, the ICE folks, our local and state lawmen and women. God bless them, and God bless America. Thank y'all.